Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
All right, what a beautiful audience you are. I get it. We are the one or probably the two things between lunch but you're all getting dessert first because I have some amazing rock stars in the industry who are here to talk about diversity in tech. So let me first start off with some introductions. My name is Kalpa Subramanian. My day job is Vice President of Engineering for Comcast NBC Universal. And I'm also a board member at Women in Cable and Technology, and also a SETE, which is an industry technology firm that does not-for-profit industry standards across California, Hawaii, and Alaska. So proud to be here. Thank you for having me. Let's get started with some of the rockstar panelists that I have here. Laura Gómez, can you please introduce yourself and what you do?
I am Laura Gómez, and I'm the CEO and founder of Atipica, and we are machine learning to predict the diversity and inclusion of the workforce for several tech companies. I'm also a founding team member of Project Include alongside 7 wonderful other strong and brilliant women like Susan Wu, Ellen Powell, Frida Kapor, Erica Baker, Tracy Chu, and Bethany McClung.
Right. Leanne Pittsford.
I'm the founder. Oh, that's loud. I could talk lower. I'm the founder of an organization called Lesbians Who Tech, and the people who love them, which means allies, not just your girlfriends. Someone said once to me, they're like, "Is it just for your partner?" I'm like, "No, that means like friends, everyone can come." And we actually start every event off with a high five. So why don't you guys warm it up a little bit? Turn your neighbor, give him a high five. Get it going. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I love it. Feel free to do this at your events. We're fine with sharing the high five love. So we're a community of 35,000 queer women all over the world. We do events in over 40 cities. We just had our event a couple days ago, which is why my voice is a little raspy. I also run something called the Tech Job Store. So it's 1 year, 50 cities, 100,000 jobs. We're going around to different cities in America and helping non-traditional talent find the job they deserve. And we're also about to launch a product called Include.io, which helps tech companies be intentional about hires.
Great, thank you for being here. And to my right, we have our very own Shannon Farley from Fast Forward.
Yes, I'm co-founder of Fast Forward. You're at my party. Thanks for being here. Yeah, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. It's timely.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, ladies, for being here and talking about a very, very important topic. And I did a little bit of research. I am, as I'm sure most of this audience is, a little bit of a geek in all of us, and doing a little bit of research about what you all do and how you got here. Every one of you speak about having found a calling over the journey of your career that led to doing what you do. So, Shannon, let's start with you. How did your professional journey and personal journey take you to where you are today, and how did you find this calling to talk about diversity in the tech space?
Sure. So I started out as a feminist activist, and I was running a feminist foundation, and we were doing grant making all over the world, and I was in Tanzania, and we had just funded a women's savings project, and at the time it was like state of the art, that it was micro lending, and we were giving women cash, and they were putting them in lock boxes, and we were really excited about what we had done. And at the end of a tour of one of our grantees, I realized like all of the women were bartering on their phones. And I was like, oh man, we just missed the boat. Like we should have empowered them. We should have given them money to build the app they wanted. And that was 10 years ago. Yeah. So the state of funding women founders is still not great. In the for-profit space, about 17% of companies are founded by women, co-founded by women. I'm proud to say that's not true in the tech nonprofit sector. 47% of tech nonprofits are co-founded by women. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And we're trailing in racial and ethnic diversity of our co-founders, but it's still twice that of the for-profit space. So I do work in tech now, but I'm very proud that our feminist values are throughout our organization. 84% of Fast Forward co-founders are women or people of color. And that's in part because 65% of the organizations we have funded have a founder who has lived experience with the problem. So it's a very different kind of founder, and they're having incredible results. You've seen them, right, over the last couple of days. They're amazing. So we're thrilled that we can give them the resources they need.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Leanne, I've read about your journey a lot. Tell us in your own words how you got here, how you found your call.
The highlights in 30 seconds. So I was kind of one of those young women who was really good at math and science. I wanted to be president, and then, I was going to go to law school, and I was like, damn the man. So I ended up getting my master's in equity and social justice, actually at San Francisco State. And it was there I learned about things like white privilege, and that, you should focus on solving problems within your own community. And I was like, all right, I'm a woman, I am white, and I am gay. And I noticed that a lot of the LGBTQ people in my program did not want to do LGBTQ issues. And so, and I think a lot of that is because it's so personal, and people just weren't ready to connect their personal and professional. And this was, a few years ago. But it was then that I decided to work in the LGBTQ community. And it was really there I learned about economic opportunity and power and just issues around economics, right? So women make less than men. You put 2 women in a couple versus 2 gay men, and we're actually at opposite ends of the economic spectrum. There's so much sexism in the queer community. I managed all the data for the No on Prop 8 campaign, which is coming up on our 10-year anniversary. And I did a study, not statistically sound by any means, but it was very powerful in the sense it took, about 7 times the emails and phone calls, meetings for about 1/6 of the donation from women versus men, right? And that showed me just how needed it was for women to have economic power, because we just didn't have a voice, right? It's one of the reasons that Lesbians Who Tech is in the Castro every year, because it's a very male-dominated space. Every LGBTQ event is 70 to 90% male, and so having 5,000 queer women show up and take over the Castro is a really powerful moment. But it was really around economic power when I realized how much opportunity and impact that could have, right? There's 2 ways that you can show up in this world, and that's with your time and with your money. And your money is a lot more scalable. And I truly believe that if you can give back through economic power, it's actually your civic duty. And I think as a woman, we need to get a little more, for me personally, I had to get more comfortable with that, right? We have a lot of sort of areas around money where we want to give back, we want to volunteer, but maybe writing a check doesn't feel as good, right? And so obviously entering into technology when I started Lesbians Who Tech, I started my own tech company after I left the organization because I wanted to give back through economic means. And that's when I entered Silicon Valley and sort of realized that, whether I went to LGBTQ events or tech events, I really felt like the lesbian voice was missing. And so for the last 4 years, we built the community, and we built essentially a roadmap to diversity that we have now scaled to other underrepresented communities.
That is great. Well done. Thank you.
Yeah.
Laura, we got an opportunity to connect backstage, and I've got an opportunity to read about what you've done, and you have a very similar story. I'm a first-generation immigrant as well, and I found that we had very similar stories kind of coming up. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got to where you're at and how you found your
So I am an immigrant, and I came here at the age of almost 10, and to the heart of Silicon Valley, Redwood City. I was undocumented. We were mixed status. My parents were not. If that just shows you how complex the immigration system is. And I grew up with my mother and my whole extended family cleaning or gardening houses or being the nannies of the tech executives. So I've been exposed to tech since I arrived in the United States. I grew up in high school where by the time I hit high school, I think I had more access to computers and computer science than, let's say, my cousins in rural Salinas. So I really got into tech early on, but I didn't think that was for me. That was something that were for the people that my mom cleaned their houses. So I tried my best to not get into tech. I did my first internship at 17, and it was software development. And this is the late 1990s, and I was like, software, why would I want to go into software? And I turned down a job at Google in 2000, because I was like, a search engine. But then...
do that, yeah.
Also, because my mom was like, what is that? And so I think I studied, I did a lot of social research. I'm a sociologist by training in my graduate degree, and I actually studied the social construction of Afro-Brazilian children. And I wanted to work for UNICEF, and my mother was like, you better get a job. And so I got a job, and a year later I joined YouTube, and then a couple years later I joined early Twitter as the head of localization, and then now here I am as a founder. But if it wasn't because of where I grew up, and it wasn't because of the access I had, but even then, seeing so many, I think I counted at one point there were like 200 employees at Twitter, and I was the only Latina. And it really baffled me. And I think at that point, I really just started to think about how we can really change the social, cultural, economic, and racial and gender fabrics of our tech companies. And so on a panel 3.5 years ago with leaders of tech talking about a pipeline issue, which is not, and the Reverend Jesse Jackson, I came up with the idea for Atipica. I was talking to an investor yesterday, and they're like, oh, well, you're at the right time. And I was like, it's been 20 years in the making. And we really want to learn about inclusion and AI and the type of biases in machine learning as we predict how people enter and leave the workforce. So, and in that process, I founded Project Include, because obviously as a solo founder, I had enough time to also do this as well. And those women are some of the strongest, most amazing women I've learned so much from. Just continue to trying to really advocate for true intersectionality in all of our conversations.
Absolutely. That's very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you.
When we talk about data in diversity and the legacy that data has created, big data is awesome, all of that is awesome, but there is an inherent problem with data. Anybody use Snapchat, Instagram, and the beauty filters here? Many people, right? I love them. Makes me look good, erases 10 years off of my face, all of that. But about a year or so ago, a lot of the very, very dominant social media platforms got into a little bit of trouble. Snapchat, as an example, they had used these beautification filters that would actually take shades of colors off. So I would look 5 shades whiter, or I would look certain specific ways. And so their explanation was, they handled it perfectly well, issued an apology, but their explanation was, we use a big data system, and prettiness is judged by color. And when you sit back and think about it, the legacy of data, the legacy of what we've kind of created, a little bit of a problem where machine learning fundamentally thinks pretty equals a few shades later, or technology means somebody with a hoodie and not a 40-year-old woman. Right? So, Leanne, let me start with you. When we discussed some of these problems, you were talking about the intentionality that has to go in when we discuss diversity, and when it has to be a part of our system. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that?
I mean, the reality is humans are biased, right? We're literally psychologically programmed to connect with people who are like us, right? We feel safer when we meet someone who is like us, when we have shared experiences, right? And it's no surprise that AI and things that are created by humans are going to reflect that exact bias, right? I mean, I think often people think there are two types. Either you're in the camp where you believe like humans are racist, sexist, anti-LGBTQ, or kind of where I sit, we live in a racist, sexist, anti-LGBTQ world, right? And there's no amount of unconscious bias training that's going to take away our decades of living on that sort of world. And we have to fight it every day, right? I mean, the study that I think you guys worked on around, is unconscious bias training working, and it's actually making it worse, right? Because people check it off. They're like, I took the training, I'm not biased anymore, and it makes them feel a little more. And it's true, and that's just not the reality, right? It's programmed into who we are, on top of just being a psychological things that humans naturally do. And so I think we're going to have to be really intentional, and we're going to have a lot of uncomfortable conversations around how we're going to fight the bias that we inherently have. And we need to come to terms with that as humans, right? I think we have a lot of, oh, no, I'm not that way. It's like we are all in this world, and we have to fight that every single day.
Absolutely, thank you. Laura, when we were talking backstage, one of the systems and processes that you're putting into place reverses a lot of the technology bias, reverses a lot of general bias with regards to recruitment systems and strategies. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and share kind of some of your thoughts about how you're leading the way there?
Yeah, we thought about it. So in data science, you randomize a training set or a sample from whatever you want to focus on. So we thought, what if we don't randomize to the structural inequalities of the workforce? So if we say 75% quote-unquote male resumes that we identified and 25%, that will be around tech. That is the population, correct? We decided not to do that. And I've had discussions around ethics and morals on we decided to actually just really make it equitable, 50% as identified female resumes versus the male resumes. And so that we ended up thinking about that. Like it is 50-50. We're not replicating any of the training or inequalities that the industry has. And so I think we think about those things. I had a very educated, super experienced engineering leader in data science asking me, well, what happens when your training set gets to be biased for women and against men? And I said, well, then we'll get to
I'll take that problem.
Yeah, we'll get to new training sets there. And so I think those are the things, and it starts at the beginning of the people that decide how are we going, not even to create the filters, but how are we actually, who's participating in the creation of the fundamentals of that algorithm. And I think in tech, we fail that, and then we catch it once way too late. Like you see a lot, and I think there's going to be, I've had discussions within my team around AI biases and just regulation around that. We see now that some data scientists are identifying gang members. You can only imagine what data points they're using and how it will perpetuate, and then say, well, the data shows that it's true. And so then people will rely this sort of, now it's going to be called fake data because it's really manipulated towards those inherently racist ideologies.
Absolutely, thank you. And Shannon, one of the things that I know Fast Forward does really, really well is does a lot of data analysis with respect to diversity and data analysis and data reversal, if you will, about what some of the legacies that have inadvertently been set in. Can you tell us a little bit more about the research and about some of the proactive initiatives that Fast Forward is involved with, and now you're helping shape our future?
Yeah, absolutely. So when Fast Forward started, we were really an accelerator. The accelerator was our core program, and as we thought about the things we would need to create to make sure there are more diverse issues being served, make sure there are more diverse founders, we've expanded our products and programs to help all 400 plus tech nonprofits in the world be better. So one of the things we're doing is we have a directory. It's much like a Crunchbase for tech nonprofits. We collect back-end data. That's how we know the diversity of founders in the sector. That's how we know how much they're raising in comparison. It's one of the tools that we use. We also have a job board. You know, pipelines is an issue for everyone, and diverse pipelines are particularly hard. So we have a job board that has over 500 open positions. And for many of you in this room, it includes volunteer positions, like board roles. So if you want to drive what's happening in tech nonprofits, particularly around diversity and inclusion on these various issues, you can participate directly. And we're using the summit, as a space to have these conversations. You know, one of the things we found in our data is while founders in the tech nonprofit space are particularly diverse, we struggle to hire people of color on our engineering teams. It's better than the for-profit space, but it's still hard. We work with Engineers for Good to figure out that kind of data, and it's an important thing for us to think about, because if the lived experience is only in the founder level, but it's not translating to the code, that can really impact what you build, just to Laura's point.
Absolutely. So, team, we have just a few more minutes left, and I could go on and on with some of these amazing, accomplished women here, but I wanted to have an opportunity to have a little bit of audience participation. So if we have mic runners out there, I already see somebody, lights are too much. Hi there, do you have a question?
Yes. My name is Erica. I know all of the panelists, so thank you all so much. A comment and a question. One, I would love to see diversity and inclusion panels from now on and include at least one male ally, because if we do not bring the people in power to the table in the conversation to help change the systems that are in place, women can't keep doing the work all by ourselves. And I know you all, and I know you're not doing it by themselves, but I think men need to be a part of this conversation. And then the second piece of that is, Leanne, you just said that inclusion or unconscious bias training is just a checkbox. Yesterday, Dure was talking about how when white people kind of unpack their privilege and then check that box too, what for each of you is the next step? You have a room of leaders and founders and people who are building companies and care. And obviously some of it's partnering with some of your companies, but talk to us about the action that both an individual and a leader can take within a company.
Yeah. I'll start. So I think it's all about accountability and urgency, right? Things don't just magically change. I know it feels like that maybe sometimes because we're like, oh, Will and Grace has been on TV and so everyone loves gays now or whatever, right? It feels like that, but really the reality is that there's a lot of hard work that goes into these types of culture change. So at Lesbians Who Tech, we have a quota. We very early on sort of said, our speakers are going to be 50% women of color. Then we added on 20% Black and Latinx, 10% transgender and gender nonconforming. I track that using data, right? I'm obviously the founder. My network is white. We had more white women apply, I think 8 to 1 in the beginning. And over time, what that's done is build trust. And now we actually had, for the first time in New York, I haven't tracked the San Francisco numbers, but we had 40% women of color attendees, right? And that never would have happened. And I know obviously the legality around quotas, but you can have targets. You can have targets that you publicly tell people. The press will hold you accountable. The community will hold you accountable. So I think it's about urgency, right? I mean, the number of women on corporate boards in other countries, they've had policy that holds them accountable to that type of change. And it doesn't lower the bar. It just changes the criteria, right? I mean, if you want to take your company public and you use the main prerequisite, which is past experience, guess what that list is going to look like? White, straight, cisgendered men, probably named John. And yes, there are more CEOs named John than there are women in the top 1,000 companies, right? We have to change the criteria. And it takes using data, and oftentimes it means having uncomfortable conversations. I've told sponsors, if you give me one more white straight woman, we're going to have, A, more conversations, but B, you're not going to get a speaker. And yes, I'm okay with losing your money if that's, your stance. And it oftentimes I think leads to growth and, the right types of conversations, but we have to create more urgency.
Absolutely. Great question. Thank you. For me, I represent Comcast, NBC, Universal. At the same time, I represent all of these not-for-profit institutions as well. So one of the things I absolutely love, and my day job, just to give you an insight, is building fiber everywhere. And when you think about the kind of people that attracts, right, it is typically very male-dominated, but I guarantee it, the back of my car has a hard hat and a safety vest, and I've worn it, and it shows the wear. If we make it a little bit less intimidating for women to come in, for women with an accent to come in and do work such as trenching, building, putting plans, blueprints, all of that, that makes the world a better place to live in, a more inclusive place to live in. So that would sort of be my next very humble attempt at getting us to a better and better place. Great question. Anybody else?
Hi, back here, Bulbul. So I wanted to say two things. One is about the conversation we're having around machine learning and AI, and the other is a different conversation as a woman of color. The machine learning and AI thing, I wanted to just point out how I would love to see more positive conversations about how we use AI for good. For example, the conversation about the we don't choose the beauty filters thing you said earlier. Why do we do that? Why does AI lead us in that direction? It's also partly because as a mom of 2 little girls, they don't have a lot of options in mainstream media or dolls or toys to choose people who look like them. So I purposefully filter out stuff that doesn't look like them because I want them to see that as beauty, right?
Absolutely.
So that's not the AI's fault. That's the toy makers, us as consumers not demanding that. I'd like to see more conversations about how we actually use AI for good instead of just blaming it for all bad things so far. Secondly, I just want to also point out ageism is another piece of D&I that we very rarely talk about. And as a woman of color, frankly, I think I experience ageism as much, if not more, than sexism and racism in the Valley.
Absolutely. Amen.
I think, let me start off, no one's here criticizing AI, but I think when it's in the hands of the powerful elite, of the people that are now going back and have structurally changed our democratic systems, and then we say, oh, well, we didn't know. We really need to hold AI. And we're at that inflection point with AI. So the more that either for-profit or non-for-profits actually understand what that power is of AI and know that we cannot just stand by, whether or AI, or decentralized currencies, or VR, any of these technologies that are creating our future, and we're not participating in creating an equality in it, we're going to fail ourselves, we're going to fail our generations. And so I think it's important for us to discuss not the evils of AI, but definitely where we are at. We're at that inflection point of challenge. I think on the second, I was with my Lyft driver yesterday who has a PhD from Iran, 25 years of experience in tech, and he started crying because of the ageism. And I understand, and we really want to build a truly intersectional framework of how different identities or systems of oppression allow that to happen. But we have to start somewhere. I do think ageism, when was the last time an investor saw an older Latina woman pitch to them? Probably the only time. So I agree with you. I don't have any children. I have 2 beautiful nieces, and it's the same. What do they see in themselves in whatever they consume? And I hope that they're creators and not consumers when they grow up.
And I would just say, I'm so glad that you're here for the AI for Good conversation, because many of the tech nonprofits here are using AI. What Time you just heard of, yes, Raheem, chatbots, early forms of AI are all throughout the tech nonprofit sector, and it's really important to raise up these incredible founders because it's a different narrative. Inclusion also has to be about narratives. AI is here, and we need different stories that include different people if we're going to move the needle.
Absolutely. We are all out of time, but I wanted to leave with just one last question in 30 seconds or less, and we'll start with you, Shannon. What is the vision of the future that you foresee?
I would like to stop having this conversation.
Amen.
Yeah. We'll always have a need for more conversations about inclusion, but I think that enough is enough. We have the data. We know what to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Laura?
What was the question again?
The vision of the future. What does your vision of the future look like?
I'll have to take away a little bit of what Leanne said. I think we're going to have a lot, and I've said it before, we're going to have a lot of uncomfortable discussions and conversations and situations before we start healing and before we all collectively work. I love that really quick, that quote from Americana that says we need to stop the oppression Olympics within our own communities and really start thinking collectively about how we can work and not have these conversations anymore.
Absolutely. Leanne?
I think it's really important for all of us when we have this work that we have in North Star of this vision. For me, it's 2 things. I want to live in a world where women make more money than men.
Nice.
And I want to live in a world where there is a Black lesbian president.
Amen to both. Amen to both. All right, we're in the home stretch team, and I'm going to bring it home. Well, thank you for your time for being here. We have some amazing speakers and rock star panelists today. Can we give them a round of applause? Thank you for being here. You're all part of the change.
Thank you.